Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. A very warm welcome to yet another session of Weekend with Wisdom. Let me begin with a small prayer. Om Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomvat Vyapta Dehaya Shri Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Shatismati Prananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Today is the concluding session of Gokulmuthu Narayanaswamyji's session on Vedanta in the light of advances in biology, especially evolutionary and neurobiology. So yesterday Gokulmuthuji spoke on many aspects of the issue. He highlighted about Panchakoshas and how it is related to modern biology and many other things. And he will be elaborating further on this. Before we begin, let me just give a very brief introduction to those who are joining today. Introduction to the speaker. Sri Gokulmuthuji is a devotee and volunteer of Ramakrishna Math. He conducts classes on Bhagavad Gita, Swami Vivekananda, and many other things. He was the founder of Vivekananda Study Circle at IIT Madras, and he is also mentor of Vivekananda Study Circle in Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. And he runs a blog at practicalphilosophy.in. He is working as director of product development at Itron India in Bangalore. He holds a BTech in electrical and electronics from IIT Madras and MSc engineering in computer science from Indian Institute of Science, and also an MA in philosophy, religion and culture from Annamaya University. And he has Mantra Diksha from Swami Gahananandaji of Ramakrishna Math, and he has learned Vedanta under Swami Paramarthanandaji of Ashavidya Parampara, and yoga from Swami Swayambhodanandaji from Bihar School of Yoga. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Thank you for coming on our show and sharing your views on the Vedanta. So, without much delay, please start your session.
Thank you. Namaste. Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Yoga Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha. Welcome to the second session. So yesterday we had covered some parts, and today we will go into more detail. So just for the benefit of people who might not have attended yesterday, and also to have a quick recap, let me go through the yesterday's slides very, very quickly, and then I will continue with today. Let me share my screen 1 second. So are you able to see the screen, the slide? Can you please confirm?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so what we have been seeing is Vedanta from the light of biology. And as you all know, like modern biology anyway has made a lot of progress in understanding the physical aspects of the human being, and we have got great benefits from the advances of biology in the field of medicine. And So that anyway, even for spiritual sadhana, the same body and mind, which is provided to us as the instrument, is what we will need to use for our spiritual progress. So from that perspective, understanding to what extent biology has progressed and how much it is there, and what we can utilize from the modern discoveries and modern knowledge of this body-mind system, which has been attained by biology. Having that knowledge can also help us in sadhana. So um, the objective here for the talk.
Any issue?
No. Just trying to advance the slides. Yeah. Okay. So so the objectives which we will have for the talk, the two-day talk, is this. So first is yesterday we saw a brief about Vedanta to get a basic understanding, and then we saw some of the overlapping concepts in Vedanta and biology. So those two topics we covered yesterday, and today we will cover the other topics where we'll look at some of the insights of biology into happiness, stress, and how yoga works, and other interesting topics. And finally, we will see how we can use all this knowledge in our spiritual path. So that is the overall objective. Now, as a brief about Vedanta, we saw that Vedanta is the essence of the Vedas, and especially which is as discussed in the end portion of the Vedas, which is the Upanishads. And we saw the tenets of Vedanta. So we saw that Jiva Tattva, which is the individual conscious entity, and Jagat Tattva, which is the insentient world, including the bodies of the Jivas. And then we saw the Ishvara Tattva, which is the universal conscious being, right, which manifests as the entire universe. And the Nirguna Tattva, which is beyond Jiva Jagat Ishvara, which is the supreme consciousness at the absolute realm. Right? So these are the basic tenets. And as far as sadhana is concerned, we saw that the goal of life is to realize the unreality of the limited individuality of the jiva. So that is the goal of life according to Vedanta. And life gives experiences so that we move toward the goal. And because we don't understand the goal of life as ordained by this universe, and we also identify with the body and mind, because of these two problems, we face sorrow in life. And Vedanta provides a series of sadhanas, like leading a virtual life, contributing to the world, practice meditation, study the Vedantic texts. By all these, we develop the right understanding about ourselves, and we get ourselves free from this identification with the body and mind, and that freedom will result in the freedom from all sorrow. So this is the path, and we saw the main source books of Vedanta, which is there. And we also saw that the four Purushaarthaas, how they relate to evolution. Evolution proceeds from the lowest organisms, where it is just only survival and multiplication, that procreation, that is what is driving them. And then as evolution happened, the higher animals have more emotions and love, hatred, courage, competition, ambition, pride, like all these kind of things, which is at the higher animal level. And then as evolution still proceeded to human level, we saw that values came in. and the concepts of right and wrong and all those things came in, and going beyond this human level is the spiritual goal, where you proceed towards unconditional permanent happiness, which is got by true knowledge of the self. And these four is the Purushaarthaas, Artha, Kama, Dharma, and Moksha, we saw. And then we also saw the Panchakosha, right? Like where we have the Annamaya Kosha, which is a physical body, the Pranamaya Kosha, which is a physiological body, Manomaya Kosha, which is the emotions, Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is the value systems, and Anandamaya Kosha, which is the storehouse of karma phala and samskara tendencies, all those. And we saw that the Atman, right? Like the I am pure consciousness beyond the 5 layers. So this is the this is what we understand, and it is quite logical. And we also saw how this fits into the biology, right? We saw that the Annamaya Kosha is the gross body, which we all know, and the subtle bodies, these are driven by 3 parts of the brain: the reptilian brain, the limbic brain, and the neocortex, right? The Pranamaya Kosha corresponds to the reptilian brain, the Manomaya Kosha corresponds to the limbic brain, Vijnanamaya Kosha corresponds to the neocortex. So all these things we discussed in pretty quite detailed yesterday. And we also saw how in a real life situation, when life presents a situation to us, and how the stimulus passes through various koshas, and how the decisions are made, and how the action is taken. So, and we discussed all these, and we also saw what lessons we can learn from these, and how the Vedantic view of Panchakosha aligns very well with the biological view of how things happen, right? So we discussed all those in quite detail. And based on this, we saw what is the roadmap which was presented by Vedanta. And basically the problem is that we have world dependence for security and pleasure. So we saw that the entire the organism, the human organism is, or even for that matter, any life form for that matter, is designed for survival, and it is not designed for actually knowing the reality. So that is in general, all living beings, that is how they are designed. And I also quoted Donald Hoffman, who has done a lot of simulation studies on this, and he has proved this concept, which of course is what is we call as Maya or Avidya, right? And so to solve this, we need to break out of the world dependence for security, right? And that is done by Karma Yoga. And we also have this dependence on the world for pleasure, and breaking out of that is done by Dhyana Yoga. And once that is achieved, we reach a state which is called Yoga Ruda. And from then on, we proceed towards Jnana Yoga, where we get exposed to the Vedantic teaching of who am I, and that gives us independence from the biological evolutionary past, which tries to influence our decision making and our emotions and attitudes. So becoming free from this entire evolutionary baggage, which binds us to the body and mind by seeking security and pleasure in the world of the senses, that breaking out of that and establishing our real nature and knowing the reality of ourselves. So that is the roadmap of entire sadhana given. And this also, we can see that it very much aligns with the teachings of Vedanta, aligns with the findings of biology. And when we have this mapping, then we can effectively utilize the discoveries of modern biology to sadhana. So that is the overall objective which I'm having here. So up to 1 second. switch to this. Yeah. So up to this we saw yesterday, and we'll proceed from here. Now, so what I'll do from now on, now this, so far this lays the foundation for the rest of the discussion. So where we have shown the parallels in the worldview and the concept of an individual as per Vedanta, which include, when I say Vedanta, it includes yoga also, yoga Vedanta, and biology. So now let us proceed towards more some specific topics which we will take up. So the first topic I want to pick up is the way stress is handled. Because stress is one of the biggest problems, and a lot of people who come to yoga, they come for saying, okay, I want to be able to handle stress and the stress related other body ailments, like chronic diabetes or pressure and those kind of things. So and of course, like yoga works, and how it works, there is a beautiful theory behind it, and this also helps us to understand better, and in our sadhana also it will help, right? So from the biology point of view, like now there is this sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. Now what happens is, whenever there is uh, so whenever there is a tough situation which is faced in life, now the sympathetic system gets kicked off. So what happens is, like throughout evolution, most of the challenges in life have been physical threats for the living beings. And so because of that, when there is a physical threat, the system has to prepare for either to fight or flight or freeze. Like those are the three: fight, flight, freeze is a reaction system, kicks in the body. And the sympathetic system kicks in a series of changes, right? Like pupil dilating and salivary glands, the mouth becoming dry, right? Like even Gita we see Sidanti Mama Gatrani, like so the Arjuna says, like, my tongue has dried, and then my hands are shivering, and my Gandiva is falling down, slipping out of my hand, like. So basically, like, whatever is described in the Gita actually matches with the sympathetic nervous system triggers all those actions, like so basically, like, this whole system happens, this whole thing happens, like and more glucose is released into the blood, and like digestion is stopped, and all the intestinal, the peristalsis, the movement, bowel movement, everything is stopped, and so all these things happen, right? Now this but then the system is doing all these things, assuming that you will have to either fight, or you'll have to run away from the situation, or you'll have to, like kind of freeze and proceed further. So, but then the threats in the modern situation is not physical. So what happens is the system prepares for this, but nothing happens, because if actually there was a fight, or there was a flight, or some action happened, then the all these preparations would have been used, and after that, when the system comes back to normal, then everything happens, the heartbeat slows down, and salivation starts, and the whatever glucose which was released gets absorbed back, like and then your intestines start moving, and all those things happen. Now problem is, most of the tough situations in the modern world, they are all mental and not physical, but then the body doesn't know that, because any threatening situation or any tough situation is the body thinks, okay, it is the same situation, and it does the same things which it has been doing for millions of years, and this is the cause for all the the health related problems which are related to stress. Now how do we handle this? We need to train ourselves to calm down, and there are techniques, so in fact, like the yogic techniques of deep breathing, chanting, like these immediately calm down the mind, and they switch from sympathetic to parasympathetic back, so that the health is not affected and everything gets handled correctly. And the problem is, even when there is when there is sympathetic arousal, then even the blood flow to the brain also reduces, which means even the thinking capacity goes down. Now, what happens is that is okay for physical situation because they're protecting the body is important, and but then the modern situations are mostly mental situations where we need to actually think more when there is a tough situation, whereas the actual physical reaction is exactly the opposite. Thinking gets inhibited when there is a sympathetic activity, whereas that is when you need to actually think more clearly, right? So we have to act against this natural historical behavior. And deep breathing, there's a lot of research which has gone into breathing and how breathing affects the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. I'll give more details about that later. And also chanting, how chanting affects, that is also a lot of research has gone into, which we will see. And for the long-term practice, the practice of pranayama, a regular practice of pranayama has shown that you can help the system to recover faster from situations. And overall, the long-term one would be to develop the right attitude, right? So that you don't even become stressed, right? Because the whole thing happens because you feel threatened. And developing the right attitude, which is basically what we saw, right? Not depending on the world for security, not depending on the world for pleasure. If that is resolved, then the body will not even get into this sympathetic activation, right? So, so all these things, there are a lot of studies happening on this. And another thing is, a lot of things, happen because of the genetic things. But then what has been found is there is a new field of epigenetics, which has come in the past few decades. And so basically the genes express themselves only when there is a situation created. So by, managing the situation in the body, which is something like sympathetic parasympathetic, similar to this, by having a more calm attitude in the body, then even the genes which create cancer or other kinds of genetic diseases, they don't express themselves. And only when the body gets into this kind of flight or flight situation, and those kind of situations create conducive atmosphere in the body for other genetic diseases like cancer and other things to get manifested in the body. So that way, what has been found is, this being able to handle stress by developing the right attitude, and by yogic practices, they even help in the right genes to manifest and to show their effect. So a lot of research has gone in this. And now coming to happiness itself, right? This is a core topic in Vedanta. As I told you, the entire Vedanta is about how to tap the unconditional eternal happiness to which we always have access to, right? And so the concept in Vedanta about happiness is that happiness does not come from outside. So that's a beautiful dog bone concept, we call, the story goes there was a dog, and it found a bone which was very dry. And my Paramathanji calls, how dry was the bone? The bone was bone dry. In English, we use the expression as bone dry itself for something which is very dry, right? So the bone was very, very dry. So which means the bone does not have any flesh or anything in it. Now what happened? The dog got a bone and it bit the bone, thinking, okay, it will get something out of it. Now when the dog bit the bone broke, and the pieces of the bone poked in the dog's mouth, and the dog's mouth started bleeding. And the dog thought that the taste of the blood comes from the bone. And the harder it bit the bone, more blood came. So it concluded that the blood is coming from the bone, and not knowing that its own mouth is what is getting hurt, and what it is tasting is its own blood. Now, this example is given about happiness. So happiness actually doesn't come from outside, right? It actually comes from inside. And whatever we see outside is only a cue to trigger the happiness within. And this exactly is the discovery of the biology also. Now, there are, so happiness has been seen, there are some neurotransmitters like dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphin. These kind of create happiness, and cortisol creates pain. So the levels of these indicate whether you are actually facing happiness or whether you are facing sorrow, right? And these are there, and these have been developed in the system so that, as I told you, for self-protection, right? So dopamine motivates to put in effort. And like whenever a person works to a, like, it induces a person to put in effort, and it kind of shows a carrot, and then it's you think you feel happy with towards it, and then you seek the reward. And so that is how the brain works. And oxytocin, like, it motivates to trust others and build social alliances. Serotonin, motivates to lead and get respect from others, like it's name and fame that induce serotonin, and you feel happy about that, and endorphin, it ignores pain, like even if when you have to work very hard, and if you have to suppress physical pain and all that, like endorphin takes care that you can push beyond your limits to sacrifice some comforts and achieve something, right? And cortisol, is a negative one, like it kind of uh, gets pushes you into the comfort zone, and it helps you to avoid dangerous risks. So these are the these are the ways by which brain creates pleasure and pain within itself. So actually, if you see from this, right, it is really true that happiness doesn't come from outside, and these are completely driven by these neurotransmitters which are within the body, and they get absorbed yeah, in a very short time. That is why, like, you don't never get satisfied with things, right? Like na vittena tarpanya manasya, like Kathopanishad says. And and like so the whole system is designed so that you don't get too much of happiness out of doing anything. The moment you achieve something, then the dopamine, which is generated, which has been released into the system, gets reabsorbed. So, and which pushes you for, like more seeking more things further, right? So that is how it works. And then there have been a lot of studies based on this. Like there was a study which is they went and talked to people who won lotteries, and people and then I saw how happy they were immediately after winning, and then at different points of time, after a few months, after a few years, and things like that. And they found that within a short time, within a few weeks, the happiness level comes back to normal, what they were before winning the lottery. And similarly, even accident victims they have studied, where immediately after an accident and or any inconvenience, they get into a state of sorrow, but within a few weeks, the you come back to normal. And all this is because, like the body has that resilience to absorb these back, so that it brings you back to the previous state, and so that it kind of motivates a person to even push further and further, right? So this is what we see, like anityam asukam lokam imam prapya bhajasvama, right? Like, so this the whole system is designed that you never become satisfied with anything at all in life. So that is what the biology also says, right? And and also the research shows that the dopamine, like when it gets released, like so there is whenever there is a whole system, when there is a cue, like when you see something which is desirable, and then you have this craving, and then you take it, and then like there is a response, and then there's a reward, like so so when you have something, for example, like if there is a mango, like when you see the mango, right, like at that time there is a dopamine rush, and then after some time, let us say, like you buy the mango and you hold it in your hand, there is another dopamine rush, and then when you actually eat the mango, there's again another dopamine rush. So these have been proven, and these actually map with the concepts of moda, pramoda, ananda, like which is there in the Upanishads and the Yoga Sutras and other places, right? So these are all we can see that the concept of happiness and how it works, everything is in total alignment with what biology has also discovered. And going further, so I'll give you some interesting research results, right, which has been done and which might be of interest to students of Vedanta also. So a 2005 study which shows that happiness brings success more often than success bringing happiness. So what it basically says is happiness is not something which comes from outside. So it is something which, if you are happy, then you are successful in life and everything goes fine. But if you start with less happiness, then you get into problems. Like so your entire system works more efficiently if there is happiness. It is not the other way around. Such studies have been there, and the winning of lotteries I explained to you just now. And so other one is does money give happiness, right? And that it has been shown by a lot of experiments that people initially, to cover the basic necessities of life, maybe money is important to make you happy, but beyond that, money doesn't add to happiness at all. Like, so this has been shown by a lot of studies, right? And then what gives more happiness? Like, is it possessions or is it experiences, right? So there again, it is shown that experiences give more happiness, right? And also another interesting study, like there are two studies, like William Harburg study, like he actually put people in a MRI scan and then made them go through experiences and then measured the happiness, the areas of happiness which are triggering the brain. And Elizabeth Dunn, she did a more of a study in real life, like where like by questionnaires and things, like, and then what they really found was spending money on others gives more happiness than spending on oneself, right? Like, so suppose if you have some money and if you have two options, like one is if you give it in charity and you spend on someone else, and other option is, okay, you buy something for yourself and you do some enjoy it. And what they have found is there is more happiness. The brain generates more happiness if it is spent on others than spent on oneself. So if you put these two together, we see that than artha, right, kama gives more happiness, and than kama, dharma gives more happiness. So these concepts are actually they have been proved by experiments, right? And also the study which showed that the small acts of kindness, even when done one day in a week, like it increases the happiness by 40%. So helping others, and then doing charity, all those things actually have shown that they increase the happiness levels. And also it is shown that 50% of happiness is genetic, 10% circumstantial, and 40% is based on voluntary controllable behavior and attitude, right? So there are some people who are genetically predisposed to more to be more happy than others, right? That is that has been shown in the research. And about 10% depends on the current circumstance, and 40% depends on how you react to the circumstance and how you like respond to the circumstances. So these kind of research have been done, and all these things are very much in line with in general what Vedanta has been talking about, right? And again, maintaining an attitude of gratitude, right, makes people happy. And there have been a lot of research on this, and there is a lot of results. This is one of the results. And also, like, just by having a smiling face makes people happier. And in fact, like the Fritz-Strack experiment, what they did was they just made people hold a pencil in the mouth. Like you just hold a pencil in the mouth, which kind of forces you to smile even without your voluntary decision. And even that, they have seen that holding that pencil in the mouth makes a person feel more happier, like when they measure the happiness. So basically, like, we have the various asanas and mudras, and also, like Gita says, manat prasada samyatvam maunam atma vinigraha, like, so those kind of whatever we read in the Gita and in the Yoga Sutras and other texts, they have been proved experimentally also, right? And also, like the posture, right? Having a good posture actually, like, that secretes more serotonin, like, having a straight posture and smiling, like that kind of secretes more of oxytocin and more, those kind of. So all these things have been shown. And so if you look at the various asanas, I think though there is research still happening, still going on. Like NIMHANS is doing some research on how different asanas, they how they affect the neurotransmitters. Like, say, for example, Sashankashan, that increases oxytocin in the body, for example, right? Like, because that gives more of the attitude it generates, right? Like every asana has got a specific mental attitude that it pushes the body and mind into, and those can be measured. And there is a lot of research which is happening in all those directions. And also, like self-esteem is something which is stressed upon. And so it is low self-esteem creates materialistic tendencies. So that has been shown. And so this is, this shows the why, like we keep insisting upon, meditating on I'm not this body, I'm not this mind, like, and I'm the Atman, it's ever pure, like, so the self-affirmations, which is there in modern psychology, which is very much in line with these kind of, the statements which we meditate upon in yoga and Vedanta, right? So those actually have been shown that they actually, after, based on the meditation about self-esteem and those kind of things, if you measure the how much a person is more towards materialistic tendencies or more spiritual tendencies, they have shown that there are changes, right? Like, and also, like, there are studies which show that than just reacting to circumstances, like you voluntarily and proactively, like do these kind of sadhanas and these kind of practices, that gives more long-lasting happiness than just something which is forced upon from outside. So there are studies which show those kind of things also. And so this is about the chanting issue. I told you, like, like chanting creates a calming effect. And there has been a very good study, like, where they compared, there is this Ave Maria chant in the Gregorian chant in the Orthodox Church, and Om Mani Padmeham of the Buddhist chant. And then they have shown that the traditional way of chanting actually reduces the breathing rate to about 6 cycles per minute, and that itself creates a calming effect. And then so this was initial study done, and then based on that there have been a lot of studies done, and then there are so they said, okay, is it 6 cycles per minute? And then like there's some other study which said like, no, it is 5.5 cycles per minute, and then they call it resonance breathing. And so there's a lot of work which happened in those. And then but our yogic scriptures and Vedantic scriptures, they say slow breathing is creates a calming effect. And there has been studies in India and abroad also, where then they found that slower the breathing, the more calming effect which is there. And there is a lot of work happening on this also now, right? So using parameters like the alpha waves and the HRV, and there's a lot of parameters which can be used to see how the parasympathetic and sympathetic balance. And what it has been found is slow breathing with prolonged exhalation makes the nervous system to switch to be more parasympathetic than sympathetic. So those studies have been there, and all these things are there in the scriptures. It is there in the what we have in the Yoga Sutras and Upanishads. All these things talk about this, and there has been a lot of research which goes into proving this, right? And of course much more research is needed, and we need to do a lot more work, but it is going on now. Coming to more interesting topics, so everything that we see is an illusion. So this is something which is there in a lot of places in our scriptures, in the tradition. And so that so basically whatever we see, whatever input we have is basically through the five senses. And even our five senses are very, very limited. Like if you see the vision, like we below infrared we cannot see, and above ultraviolet we cannot see, and the number of colors we can distinguish is very different. So the world which we see is very different from the world which is seen by a sparrow or a lizard, or like any other animal, because each animal has its own range of frequencies that it can see, and its own range of dominant frequencies that it can recognize more. So similarly with smell, similarly with hearing, and say for example, cat's smell is so powerful that if it comes and looks at a room, it can say, okay, 5 minutes back this person was sitting on this sofa, and though he's not there now. And it can look at a person and say, okay, this person has gone for a walk in the park, because I can smell the pollens from the park. So a cat can deduce a lot more information about a situation based on its smell than what we can, right? So that way the entire world which we see is very, very much restricted by the power of our senses, and we don't have any access to what is outside that, right? So of course we have extended our senses by using telescopes and microscopes and all that, but then finally, we are still limited by the senses. And from that point of view, everything we see is actually an illusion. And because the amount of sensory information which can be processed is very less, what actually the brain does is it does a lot of filling in, right? So this is called gestalt effect. And like say for example, you see a tree here, even though these are just independent some pictures, right, of people. And you can see a sphere in the center, right? And you can see a cube in the center between the dots, even though that is not there. Like our brain fills up the lines in between so that it looks more like this, right? So this is called gestalt effect, and then there's a lot of research on this and different kinds of filling that the brain does. And so basically what is seen is that any perception that we have, a small fraction of it comes actually from the real world outside, and a majority of part of it is actually filled in by the brain. And there are other effects, like there's a McGurk effect, like where for you can search for it on YouTube. You can find there's a person who there is a video which is shown, and you listen to him what he's trying to say, whether he's saying va or ba. and depending the same sound, depending on different videos, you can clearly hear. In one case, you can hear that it is a va. In another case, you can hear that it is a ba. But actually, like the sound is the same. It's only the video which is different. And so your vision affects your hearing, right? So that is the McGurk effect, which is shown. And there's also, you can search for this Yanni and Laurel also. There are a lot of YouTube videos on that. Like, so they have made a audio clip which sounds like Yanni to some people and which sounds like Laurel to some people. And even the same person, if you listen at different points of time, sometimes you will listen it as Yanni, and sometimes you will listen to it as Laurel. And it is very clear, like it's very, very clearly distinguishable. So this is a audio illusion where, and it is basically depends on the frequencies have been tuned so that people who are more sensitive to lower frequency will listen to something, and people who are more tuned to higher frequency will listen to something else. Like that is how. And so these are all, these show how your sense you cannot believe the sense. And this is a very popular image, right? And some people see it as white and gold, and some people see it as blue and black, right? I don't know what you see it currently as, but then don't be surprised that another person looking at it says something which is very different, right? So this is a picture which is very popular on the internet. Like, it appears as two different colors to some people, and even for the same person at two different times, it will appear differently. And this is another very popular optical illusion where you can see that the A portion is dark and the B portion is light, actually. But then if you hide the center part with your finger, and then if you see, you can see that both of them are actually same color. A and B are actually same color. It is your eyes which show this, which create an illusion that they are appear different. So like this, there are lot of optical illusions and auditory illusions which are there, and even cognitive illusions like this, right? Like even though what you see is the same, but then your brain makes different sense of things, right? So if you look at there's a lot of studies which have gone in all these, and so basically we don't have access to the real world out there. Now, first, is there a real world out there or not? That is a philosophical question. But then even if there's a real world out there, we don't have access to the real world. And what we see is highly colored by the limitations of our senses, and then the filling in which is being done by the mind, and so many things. And another interesting thing is sensory deprivation, that is, it's called Gunsfield effect. And if you go to YouTube, you can find a lot of videos on how to create a hallucination generating eye patches. So what happens is our the vision and auditory system are so powerful that they always need to something to be fed into them. And if you deprive the vision, or you deprive the hearing by having a noise cancelling headset or something, then within about 10 minutes, your brain starts creating colors and then scenery and sounds and all kinds of things. So the sensory deprivation creates hallucinations, and this is again a very, very commonly proven and concept, right? So looking at all these things, if you see, like is what we seeing reality, like is it really real, how real it is, so these questions are asked in Vedanta, and Vedanta says the reality is pure consciousness, and this entire world is created, right, because of avidya, and it appears before you to fulfill the desires, and because of that. And uh, so of course, like that is taking it to a very, very large extent. But then of course, even science is going there. Like I told you about Donald Hoffman's experiments, and even Donald Hoffman even is proposing that this entire world which we see is more like an icon of whatever is the reality. Like you should listen to some of his talks, and Still, it is controversial currently, but then maybe over a period of time, we might there might be some progress in science on that. And so overall, if you look at it, it is moving more towards that what we see is an illusion than what we see is reality, right? And again, coming more, like as I told you, like color or psychology, there's a deep psychological conditioning of colors, forms, imageries. We see that in Vedanta and Yoga, there are various kinds of meditations which are prescribed, right? And they have lot of correlation to observations in biology and psychology. For example, like swimming pools are always colored blue or light green, because the color of blue is something which doesn't normally occur in nature. Like if you see living things, right? Blue is a pigment which doesn't occur a lot in living beings. Most of so what happens is most of the what do you call harmful or poisonous stuff, like in the biological sense, right? Like rotten meat, or like any eating any edible thing which has got a lot of germs in it, they are usually red or orange or yellow, in those kind of shades, right? So because of that, what has happened is there is a deep biological conditioning on looking at a color, like whether that color generates a sense of cleanliness or not in you. Like so there are I think if you go to BBC Science website, there are beautiful psychological experiments and questionnaires to show you these kind of effects. Colors, like and forms and imageries, these have got very good, very deep psychological conditioning because of the evolution. And because and yoga and Vedanta, they seem to have be cognizant of these. And if you see, for example, the one of the most common meditations is imagining a golden yellow light in the center of the heart, right? Even like Narayanaswamy says, right, like Nilato Yadamat Yastad Vidyullekeva Bhaswara, like like just like a streak of lightning in the center of a dark cloud. Those kind of imageries are very common in the Vedas, Upanishads, and Yoga Sutras, and even Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and all these places where the various meditations which are given, like they have very deep connotations to the psychological conditioning which we are already into. Like say, for example, like if you read if you go through the meditations which are prescribed, like for example, it might be a dark starry sky, like or a red rose in a black background, or a blue lotus in a lake. Like this, there are so many imageries which are prescribed for meditation in yoga, and they are, all of them are based on deep studies of what imageries and what colors trigger what kind of psychological conditioning which is already there. They are all based on that. And sound is another very interesting and thing. And Om, of course, is like we all know, Om is a very, very popular, most popular symbol of God, right? And the word Om itself is represents God because Om has three parts: A, U, and And A is the most fundamental sound, right? Where and that is can be made by the human vocal system. A comes when the whole thing is open, and U is where you try to kind of restrict in the middle, and ends at the mouth, which is at the end. So that way, Om represents all the sounds which a human being can make, right? It's the universal, it's a symbol of universal being, because as I told you yesterday, the universal being, God, is that person to whom this entire universe is is what he, like the entire physical universe is his body, the entire mental universe is his mind, entire all the life in all the universe is his life. It's a manifestation of his life. So when we have the concept of God, who is the universal being of this entire universe, the most appropriate word symbol or sound symbol for God becomes Om, which is kind of covers the entire the vocal system of the human being. So when a human, so the most appropriate sound symbol a human being can provide to the universal being is Om, because the way it is structured, and also because of the way it is structured, the effect that it has on the human body and the mind also happens. So like it kind of, it triggers the entire system which is there. And also this is the Sanskrit language is very well structured, where different parts of the mouth, like where the sound is produced, and many of the mantras are based on these, like say for example, when you say Narayana, right? Na is, when you say na actually you should not hear this. Okay, actually in Sanskrit or in Devanagari there is only one na. This this na is only one, whereas this na itself, this dental is this fourth part. That na itself has got two types. One is where the tongue is visible, the other one is where the tongue is not visible. Like in Tamil and Malayalam scripts, you have two different symbols for those two different pronunciations. And the na here is when the tongue is visible outside. And then when you say na, so this is where it touches. And then when you say ra touches here, right? And then ya will be here, and na actually here, this na is the cerebral na, like it is here, right? Like so when you say Narayana, you can actually see that the place where the tongue touches moves gradually from outside to inside. Like and if you include Om also in the front, Om or Namo is usually included. So when you say Namo Narayana, Om Namo Narayana, like it kind of goes in sequence, exactly following the place where the tongue touches the palate, right? So that way, like when you say Om Narayana, Om Namo Narayana, Om Namo Narayana, with the right pronunciation, it actually it pulls your attention, your consciousness from outside to inside, right? Like so that is how the mantra is designed. And Namah Shivaya is designed like like a snake kind of thing, like it goes Namah Shiva, like like it kind of keeps alternating. And similarly, like this kind of analysis can be done by on various mantras, and where they predominantly how they work and how they touch and what kind of effect they create, right? Like and so there's a lot of science behind how the mantras and the sounds, they affect the psychology there, like and the bija mantras, like lam vam ram yam hum, like so lam is the Mooladhara, like so lam basically increases your security consciousness, and vam increases the awareness of the sense organs, and ram is the Manipuri, like where it creates a lot of increases the metabolic activity, and yam is at the heart center, which increases your limbic, it triggers your limbic system, and hum is at the throat center, which is more for communication and which goes there. So like so basically, like each of these sounds are supposed to have specific psychological impacts, and there is a lot of work happening in studying these, and which is going on. And similarly, Aim is a Saraswati mantra, like which is more if you map it to Aim, like it goes this way. Hrim is like is more is a Durga mantra, which has this Ra Bijakshara, which increases the metabolism. and then stream is kind of combines them together, which is the so like this, like the how the bijaksharas map to the various ways the sound is produced, and also the various psychological effects that they have. Now that is a lot of studies happening in those directions, right? And now coming to another topic, which is free will, right? Like free will is something which is it's a big enigma, right? And so when we say free will is when I have done something, did I have the freedom to do it or not? Like that is the basic concept of free will. Like of course, like I can lift something, and I can decide. Now I can say, okay, did I lift it or not? Did I want to lift it or not? Did I do it of my own volition, or did someone else decide it? And so now that is what is free will. And when you say free will, the question is, okay, free will is free from what? So then we need to see, okay, like what all affects our decision, right? So if you go purely from a scientific, materialistic, reductionist point of view, right? Every thought is the effect of some chemical and electrical activity in the brain. And when every thought is the result of chemical and biological activities, then there is nothing called free will at all, right? Like because there is no individual who actually controls it, because if the thought itself is the result of material phenomena, and then everything else arises, or emerges from there, then there is no concept of free will. So if you go purely by the materialistic scientific point of view, there is no free will at all, right? Like everything is just happens as per the laws of physics, that's all, right? But then we tend to have a more a mixed concept, where we use the analogy of an FM radio, like, so let us say you have a radio which plays some music, and of course the music comes from the electronic components, and the speaker and all those things are there from where the sound comes. Now the quality of the sound will depend on the quality of the radio which you have. But then the actual music does not come from this radio. It is transmitted from somewhere else, and what you see here, this is only a receiver. This receives and it converts the non-perceptible avyakta, we call it, non-perceptible form of the music is converted into a perceptible form by this radio. So now, which means like the radio does not create the music, but the radio basically manifests the music. So now the question is, does the brain create thoughts, or does the brain manifest thoughts like an FM radio? Now, if we say like, no, like there is nothing outside, everything is from the brain only, then there is no free will at all, because there is no external entity at all. And so all the thoughts are from the brain, and that is because of some physical chemical reactions and some electricity running in the nerves. So there is no free will there. But then if you assume that, okay, like, no, this the brain is only like a radio, like it manifests the thoughts, but then like the source of the thought is something which is outside, which is non-physical, right? Like the source of the thought is non-physical, then you have the concept of free will starts applying. So now, what is right? Like there has been a lot of experiments done, and there's a lot of debate going on, right? And even when it comes to the brain, like, how decisions are made, right? Like, so the brain, we have the different parts of the brain, I told you, like the limbic system, the neocortex. So like, it has been shown that the emotional part of the brain plays a lot of role in deciding things. Like there have been people because of a defect or a surgery, like who don't have a problem with the limbic system. It has been found that they're able to very clearly analyze the pros and cons of situations, but you're not able to take a decision at all. Like if you remember Chidi in A Good Place, there's a TV serial called A Good Place. It's a very nice serial. There's a person called Chidi who cannot make decisions, and he is a person who is shown as a person who has got no emotions at all. Like he's just purely rational person, and he is shown as having a lot of problems making decisions, and that actually is based on the the current theory in neuroscience, where decisions are actually made by the emotional system and not by the rational system. The rational system only does the weighing the pros and cons, but actual decision is done by the emotional system. Like, so that is the that has been found, and we also have this gut feeling, right? Like we feel something is right. So there actually that also has been proved, like how the brain make decisions. Sometimes, like, when there's a situation that the brain wants to decide, it kind of creates a simulation in the system and then sees how rest of the body reacts to it, and then it picks up the reactions, and then based on that, the brain decides what is right, what is wrong. Like and that is where this gut feeling and comes from. Actually, like there are a lot of research which has happened there, and the decision making path, how decisions are made, different decisions are made differently. Like there's a lot of study there, and there's a lot of work which is going on there. And okay, maybe I should go faster on over there. Okay, so there is look up for this very interesting Toxoplasma gondii, which is a brain parasite in rats. And what happens is, if a rat is infected by this parasite, the rat actually wants to run before a cat, and it wants to get eaten by the cat, because the parasite has its own life cycle where it gets eaten by the cat, and then it multiplies in the guts of the cat, and then when the cat's feces it comes, and then when the rats go near that, then it gets infected into the rat again. So the whole life cycle of the parasite has some part of it in the rat and some part of it in the cat. And if a rat is infected, the rat loses its fear for cat, and this parasite goes and affects the brain and removes the fear of cats from that rat, so that rat has got higher probability of getting eaten by the cat. That is the kind of things which happen. And these are all like indications, which also of course is happening in our own brain also. So we cannot say our free will is actually free, right? That's what I'm coming to here. And there's a very interesting case of a brain tumor which made a school teacher into a pedophile. Like, and then when they removed the tumor, he became normal. And then after a few years, again the tumor grew, and again the pedophilic tendencies came in. And it's a very interesting study which show that even in a human being, the moods, the emotions, the tendencies, they are all affected a lot by the physical things which are happening in the brain. And how many of you have seen the movie Drishyam in Malayalam, and Tamil it is called Papanasam. I don't know what it is called in other languages, maybe Drishyam only. So it is made it is about manipulating the memory of eyewitnesses. And actually this is based on I think this case was sometime in the 2000s. I think Elizabeth Loftus, like she's a psychologist who showed that memory of eyewitnesses cannot be relied upon and how they can be manipulated. And of course, like these all affect our decision making, because we depend on our memory, and memory itself is not reliable, then our decision making will get affected. And this very famous Libet's experiment, which was done sometime in the 1970s and 80s. And of course, recently there are some people questioning it, but then overall, some people have been even proving it. There is a lot of whether free will is there or not. So you can look up these, and very interesting work which is happening. And then there is another discussion on if there is no free will. Suppose there is no free will, is morality possible? Like, does it make our courts and our laws become invalid because there is no morality? Like, how about crime, punishment? How do we have to change everything? There is a lot of work happening on there. And Sam Harris has done phenomenal work in that. There's a book called Moral Landscapes. And there's a book called Free Will also, which he has written, like where he argues and he shows how, even in the absence of free will, how a human society can be structured. Like those kind of things. And Bhagavad Gita has got different shades of free will. It, like you have shlokas which says Uttareda Atmanatmanam Natmanam Avasadayet, which, gives you, shows you a lot of free will. To, Nimittam Matram Bhava Savyasachin, like where is to be only a tool. To, Prakritehe Kriyamanani, Sarvanika karmasya, like, like that nature does everything. So there is lot of full spectrum of free will which is available in the Bhagavad Gita. And of course, Bhagavad Gita also says in which context, under what condition of spiritual development of a person, that each one apply. So the Gita's way is, it gives you a full spectrum, right from you have a lot of free will to you have some free will, you have no free will. So here it has the full spectrum. And Gita also very clearly says under what conditions you should take which position for your spiritual development. So that way Gita is very clear, and that itself will make a very beautiful study. I think Professor Arindam Chakravarti, I think he has made some study on the concept of different concepts of free will in Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, that is something which I think is a very good research topic for people who are interested in this. And again, like as Gita says, like nigraha kim karishyati, like what can restraint do, right? So basically, what the decisions you make, lot of decisions happen in the subconscious layer, like, so which means you don't have actually free will, like, so your decision actually happens, and even with whether you know or not, the brain makes decisions and actions are done, right? But then what we have, one place where we have free will is how to form the samskaras, how to create those subconscious tendencies. There we have a lot of free will there, right? Like so we satsanga and introspection, retrospection, right? Like by studying and by like exposing ourselves to different concepts, and by being with people who have got similar thought patterns, and also identity, right? Like by developing an identity, like saying, okay, I am a disciple of so and so, I am a devotee of this tradition, or I am a seeker of truth. Like by developing your identity, you can drive it deep into your subconscious, so that the decisions made by your subconscious are in line with what you actually want to decide. So that is a more effective way of utilizing your free will, because directly you cannot affect your free will, which is what Gita and Upanishads say, and which is what actually is the discovery by modern science also, that free will is something which is not directly under your control. Like there's a lot of proofs for that. And so another topic which is quite interesting, which is discussed both in biology and in Vedanta, is this concept of an universal being. Like, is there like one universal being, one universal mind? How independent are each of our lives and each of our minds, right? So yesterday I told you, introduced you to this concept, right? So where this whole physical universe is there, and our physical body is not separate from the physical universe. It's an integral part of the physical universe. And similarly, even life, right? Like every living being is a food to another living being. So the living universe is very, very interconnected, and there is no individuality there. And similarly, at the mental level also, right? Everything that I think is what I have picked up from various books and various teachers and various places, and I'm just making different combinations of them. So actually, like, there is nothing, no thought which is original, or no thought which is exclusively there. No mind can exist independent of other minds, right? Like, so then that gives a concept of, okay, so is there a universal mind, right? So those kind of ideas are there. Now, one thing which we can look at here is how many living beings are there, right? Then we'll say, okay, there are millions and millions of living beings. Like, but then actually, if you look at it, right? Now, suppose, let us say there's a cell, and if you consider a cell as a living being, the cell divides into two. Then are there two living beings, right? And in case of zygotes, like sperm and ova, they are two different cells. They combine together into one cell. So now, like, so how do you count how many cells are there? Like, it's not possible, right? Like, because they keep dividing, they keep merging, right? And the same thing even with even bigger plants, right? Like, you just cut one branch and then you put it in the soil, and then another plant comes out of it. Or you take a seed and sow it, and another plant comes out of it. So how many plants are there? Like, like, even if you look at a a hibiscus tree or a mango tree, right? Now, each branch actually has got a capability of being another plant by itself. And even while sitting where it is another plant only. So that way, like, it is a living being inside a living being inside a living being. And of course, all our cells, are living beings by themselves. So if you look at this whole concept, right, actually there is just one life in this entire universe, which manifests in different organic entities where it can manifest. That's all, right? There is one life in this entire universe, which manifests in organic systems where it can manifest. And this is the concept which is there in the Upanishads also. Like there's a very beautiful, in Chandogya Upanishad, there is a very beautiful experiment which, the teacher asked the disciple to do. Like, he said, okay, cut a plant. Okay, this, where did the life go? Where did the life go? No, there's a very beautiful thought experiment which is there in Chandogya Upanishad about, like what is life, how many living things are there, and, like the very understanding those. And this has been, like a concept which has been developed. This concept you can much further, like Richard Dawkins in his books, Selfish Gene, you can see that like there also the concept that which he's proposing is this entire universe is one living being actually, and it uses all the evolution and everything is just so that it keeps developing and multiplying. Like such concepts are there, and then but then the question is, of course, Richard Dawkins is an atheist. He doesn't believe in an intelligent creator as such, right? But then there are other people like like raise questions about like this entire universe is so well what you call balanced to support life forms. So is it created by an intelligent creator? Like they call this the Goldilocks situation, because like even if you take every constant, like whether it's gravitational constant or Planck's constant or Avogadro's constant, like if you take any of them, the physical constants, chemical constants, if they are even slightly more or less than what they are, it would not have created a universe at all. Like it would have completely, this entire universe would have been empty, right? That's what physics proves. Like it has been very well shown. And even if you take Earth, right, like even if it is slightly closer to the sun, then life is not possible. If it is slightly away from the sun, also life is not possible. Like so there are like this. There are so many like balance, which is called a Goldilocks. This is called Goldilocks situation. So we can find so many in nature, like right from physics to geology and everywhere, that like it is as if this whole universe is intentionally designed to support life. Now the question is, okay, so is it so? Now, if it is so, then is there an intelligent creator? Now, even in multiple places, even if things are slightly different, then life would not have been possible, right? So this is a question which a lot of people are even pondering over. And again, the question is, okay, can God be proven or disproved? Like like if you look at Karl Popper's condition of verifiability and falsifiability, like will the concept of God come under even the falsifiability concepts as defined in the framework of science, right? And what is consciousness? Like this is a very and consciousness with a capital C, right? Because consciousness, the small c is easy. Like we know we are conscious, we know we are aware, right? Like so what is called as Chida Bhasha in the Vedantic parlance. But then is there a Chaitanya? Like is there a consciousness with a capital C, right? Which is is there an universal consciousness? Is it there or not? Like, and there is a lot of arguments towards for and against that, and I don't want to get into the details now. Maybe like I think I have discussed that in quite detail in another Weekend to Wisdom talk, where approaching from the point of view of entropy and thermodynamics, like how can you define consciousness and those kind of things. Yeah, and this I referred a couple of times. Like simulation studies by Donald Hoffman show that survival and knowledge of reality are contradictory. Like so, this entire the biology of the system is designed for survival and not to know the reality, right? So now can we how real is reality? Like like those kind of ideas are there. Yeah, and then there are some controversial topics. Like there is I think some 30 years back, there was this concept of morphic resonance by Rupert Sheldrake, and of course he was like quite shamed by the scientific community for this concept of morphic resonance. It was just a proposal, like it's not something which is proved or disproved. It's just a proposal which he had given, where he considers such a universal mind which is there, and it is controversial. And similarly, even Joseph Murphy's book, Subconscious Mind, like it talks about an universal subconscious mind, which is also more of a considered as a pseudoscience than of a science. So this morphic resonance and Joseph Murphy's work, like these are more of pseudoscience, but I just want to mention it here so that in case you are thinking, what about it, right? And is there physical mind-to-mind transfer of ideas? There is a lot of work happening, experiments happening on that. So Nitinja, maybe I'll take another 5 minutes and complete it, and then we can look for question and answers. Yeah.
Yes, Gokulmuthu, we have just 7-8 minutes, so you can take 2-3 questions.
Yeah, and another very interesting topic is the supernatural powers, so-called supernatural powers, and there is a lot of work which is happening in that. As you all know, like the brain has got multiple states, like depending on the frequencies. You have the delta waves, theta waves, alpha waves, beta waves, and what has been found is that when the brain is in an alpha state, it is very much more receptive than in other states. And many of these meditation techniques, and even hypnosis, and even this lot of when you're drowsy, there are states where the brain gets into this alpha state, and it has been found. And a lot of self-development techniques, they use this to say, okay, you put it how they teach you how to get into an alpha state, and then in that alpha state, how to do positive affirmations, and then so that way you can reprogram your subconscious mind. Like those things are there, those techniques are there, and they have been very well researched, documented, and these are all very much in line with the meditation techniques which are there in the Upanishads and in the Yoga Sutras and other places. And the brain has something called as a default mode network, right? Like, so where there's a constant mental chatter which is happening, and if you reduce the chatter, then it increases the concentration and reduces anxiety and all that. And this is something which is a lot of work is happening on this. And so in 2012, there was a new scientist magazine reporter, Sally Addy. You can search for this in the internet. You can find her report also. And this is also mentioned in the book Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari. So basically what happened was she went into a military research center, a military lab, US military lab in California, and where they had designed a helmet, which, and then they had this simulation, a battle simulation, where she has to take a laser gun, and with wearing VR glasses, she has to shoot a lot of enemies who are coming from all directions. And first, while trying directly, like she couldn't shoot much, and the game got over within a few minutes. And then they gave a helmet which she wore, and wearing that helmet, again the same simulation study, and she was able to accurately shoot every enemy, and then like the game could go on for hours, and she was able to do a lot. The performance is almost perfect. And then what actually the US Defense Department, that lab, they have done is they have designed a helmet which will create a transcranial magnetic field by which the default mode network will get completely cut off, right? So the DMN activity in the brain is completely suppressed, and then that increases the performance of even a person who is holding up this gun for the first time. Even such a person can shoot accurately, and who can perform so very well. So there's a very interesting report and experiment which is happening. And so this default mode network, there is a lot of work happening on that, how to suppress a default mode network. Of course, there are some illegal and banned ones like psychedelics, psychedelic mushrooms and some chemicals. So So there are those things also. And then there are a lot of other techniques which are being developed, which are very much in line with, like the Buddhist practice of samatha or the yogic practice of samyama, right? Like, so these are all techniques by which the default mode network is stopped. And I think Mihaly has done a lot of work on this flow state, which he calls as flow state. So these are all, very much in line with what Vedanta has been talking about, what yoga has been talking about, right? And now there are a lot of formal academic research which is happening on all these things. And of course, like there's another case. This is savants who can remember enormous visual and auditory details. Like you can find a lot of YouTube videos where a person is taken on a helicopter ride above the city, and then he comes down and then he starts drawing everything to so great detail. Like, and there are people who can create music and with such great detail remember things. So the powers of the brain seems to be a lot more than what we currently use and currently which we tap. And there is a lot of experiment, lot of work happening in trying to understand it and do this. And these are all, if you look at it, like the Buddhist practice of samatha and vipassana is you increase the level of the brain, the concentration and attention, and then you focus it on vipassana, like on who am I and what is this, what is happening in my brain. And that is how like they correlate it, and that is how it related to Vedanta and sadhana. This I will skip it. So there is maybe you can just read the slide. Like, so this is basically about whole thing about identity. Who am I? Like, and how the unconscious part of the brain and conscious part of the brain, how they interact, how they conflict. So you can read a book called Waking Up by Sam Harris, where the entire book is about this. And of course, there are movies like Onion and Karthik Calling Karthik, which you can watch. And there is you can also visit this University of Virginia website, which has got, which is collecting enormous amount of data about past birth memories, near-death experiences, and ESP. Like, so they are collecting a lot of data. And of course, there is a lot of controversy. People call it pseudoscience, but then they say like we have collected data, like how to interpret it is up to the scientific community, right? Like, so, and how all these things, putting all these things together, right? How we can go, one second, I'll just go back one step. Putting all these things together, right? How do we use it, right? So what we need to understand is that this body and mind are that of an animal, okay? And they are designed for survival and not for knowing the reality. This is what we call as Maya. This is what we call as avidya, right? And to be free from all sorrow, we need to know the reality and we need to align to it. So this is the whole concept of moksha. That is the spiritual path, the goal, right? And this knowing the reality is enlightenment. And and this is the breaking the bondage of this threefold bondage, right? We saw, right, security seeking, pleasure seeking, and individual identity. And breaking the security seeking is done by karma yoga and service. Breaking the pleasure seeking is done by dhyana yoga and compassion. And then shifting the individual identity is done by jnana yoga, which is shravana manana nididhyasana. So this is the whole the path, the roadmap of sadhana, right? And all traditions, whichever tradition you go, finally it will boil down to, the details will differ, but then this is the whole roadmap. And entire Vedanta is points to this, and this is exactly what is this is supported by the modern discoveries of biology and neuroscience. So, we can we can learn from biology and neuroscience on those concepts, and we find that they're all validating this path of Vedanta, which Vedanta has proposed. And main thing is satsanga is very important, because as I told you, most of the decisions happen at a subconscious level. So you have to build the right samskaras, and the right identity and the right satsanga will help you to do that. And with that, you will be able to proceed in your spiritual life. So, and here I'll are a few books. regarding Vedanta and Yoga, Vedanta, mainly my sources are Swami Paramarthanandaji's lectures for the traditional Vedanta. And of course, we have books by Swami Vivekananda, Ramakrishna Mission books, Chinmaya Mission books, right? Where all the concepts are all very well presented. And quickly if you want to pick up Vedanta, I think lectures of Paramarthanandaji and Sarva Priyanandaji, there are plenty available on YouTube. You can listen to them. That would be the easiest way. And when it comes to the biology, like the science part of it, I have given in a sequence where more authentic is in the beginning and less authentic is in the end. So this is a very beautiful book, David Eagleman's book. That's a very good book for beginner, anyone who wants to know about neuroscience. Sam Harris, this is a highly recommended. And Richard Weissman's book, it's a very beautiful book on dealing a lot of topics like happiness, persuasion, and things like that. So Atomic Habits, Free Will by Sam Harris. Sapiens covers a lot of topics, and it also includes very good description, very good discussion on happiness and those topics also. Homo Deus, Habits of a Happy Brain. You can read about the dopamine and oxytocin and the serotonin, endorphins, cortisol. Like all those things are very, very nicely given in this book. Breath, this is a very beautiful recent book. Talks about pranayama, how it works, and in a very scientific way. And it also gives references to a lot of very recent research happening in all those areas. Darwin's Cathedral, this is a book which again links evolution to religion. It's a nice book. Authentic Happiness, it's more of this is Martin Seligman on positive psychology. And more than happiness, this is a Stoic, how mapping Stoic and Buddhist concepts of happiness with the scientific concepts. It's a very beautiful book. And Daniel Dennett was one of the books which is good, Bacteria to Back and Back, where he maps the whole evolution and how things are going on. And there is another, Breaking the Spell, which is about the psychology of religion. That's also very good, Daniel Dennett. Stealing Fire, Art of Losing Control. So as you go here, these are all more of pseudoscience than of hard science. Joe Dispenza, Rupert Sheldrake, Bruce Lipton, Joseph Murphy. These are not considered as mainstream scientists as such, but then they have good references. They have very good concepts which you can take up and then which you can build up from more of a scientific point of view. But most of these authors are more of pseudoscience than of science. So beware, I'm not recommending them as science, but I'm recommending them as pointers to some good ideas. That's all. I'll stop here. Any questions you can
thank you, Gokulmuthu, for the wonderful presentation. I'm sure all our viewers have extremely enjoyed it. We are all out of time. We don't have time for questions, but I'll just ask you one quick question. So please do answer quickly, briefly perhaps. There's one question which says, what is the role of cultural or religious tradition in the scientific framework of looking at Vedanta? The progressive orientation of science has declared many such tradition systems as useless or near useless. Do we need to adopt an extra scientific attitude to study Vedanta?
See, the importance of cultural traditions cannot be understated. They are very, very important. Okay, because psychologically we are designed for culture and rituals. Like, say, for example, when two people meet, you handshake, right? You shake hands. That's a ritual. And when you want to part, you say goodbye. That's a ritual, right? And if you visit any, sports or a military parade or sports Olympics, for example, it's all rituals, right? Because human beings cannot think or express emotions without rituals. We need rituals. Okay, so for different purposes, we have got different rituals. Okay, like giving a rose or giving a bouquet is a ritual. And similarly, offering flowers at an altar is also a ritual, right? And there is no difference between this ritual and that ritual. So rituals and cultural tenets, they are integral part of the human psyche, right? And to make the gross mind into subtler and subtler levels, we need them, right? Like we need music, we need poetry, we need art, dance, like all these things are needed to make the mind subtler, so that the mind can access more fine, refined concepts, so that we can finally attain the spiritual goal. So both as human beings and as spiritual sadhaks, cultural aspects and ritualistic aspects are very important. And they have been shown to have very definite psychological effects.
Okay. Thank you, Gopalji. Another quick question. Is age or experience modulate the sensory illusion?
Good. So does age or experience? Yeah. See, basically, like the illusion, as I told you, is at multiple layers. One is the senses themselves are not, they don't capture everything. Okay, they are filtering half of it. And then after that, it is colored and it is filled by the brain, so that it makes up something which you want to see, right? So as you age, for example, your receptivity to higher frequencies of sound will become less, right? And that's a big, very, very big problem in all our families. Like our old grandfathers, they cannot hear well female voices, but they can hear male voices well. And then our grandmother says, okay, if I talk, he cannot listen, but if my son talks, he's listening. But that is actually biologically correct, like, because as the person ages, the high frequency sounds cannot be heard clearly. So there are effects, right? And of course, the mind fills up. So all these things affect so various things affect, like experiences and age. Yes, surely they affect the perception and the interpretation of the perception also.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you again, Gokulmuthu, on the behalf of entire Advaita Academy and all our viewers, for a wonderful lecture series, very insightful, and I'm sure all of our audience have got a lot of food for thought, so to speak, to reflect upon. And viewers, with this, we come to the conclusion of this Weekend with Wisdom. And do follow us on Facebook and Twitter for more updates about latest events. With this, we conclude the session. Thank you again, Gokulmuthu, for making time for the session.
Yes.
Shri Guru Pyo Namaha.